Serial killers are often described as wolves in sheep's clothing, hiding in plain sight. But few embody that phrase as disturbingly as Rodney Alcala. He wasn't just a predator lurking in the shadows, he was someone who smiled for the cameras, appeared on a nationally televised dating show, and won. All while actively murdering women and young girls. Rodney Alcala was one of the most sadistic serial killers in American history. His crimes were not just about murder, they were about control, domination, and prolonged suffering. He played with his victims like a cat with a mouse, strangling them into unconsciousness, reviving them, and doing it over again before finally ending their lives. Despite having an extensive criminal record, including a rape and attempted murder charge, Alcala repeatedly manipulated the system and was released early, only to kill again. How did he get away with it? How many people did he really kill? And what can his case teach us about the flaws in the justice system that allowed him to keep hunting for over a decade? Welcome to True Crime Investigator, where we bring you compelling stories of crime, mystery, and justice. Sit back, stay curious, and let's get into today's case. Between 1977 and 1979, Rodney Alcala's murder spree intensified. His victims were mostly young women, and each crime scene told the story of prolonged torture, pleasure, and ritualistic violence. His signature was unmistakable. He would strangle his victims until they passed out, then revive them, only to strangle them again, repeating this multiple times before finally killing them. He posed their bodies in humiliating positions after death. He often used objects nearby to strangle them, including shoelaces, nylons, and even their own clothes. Jill Barcomb, 18, November 1977. Jill Barcomb had recently moved to California from New York looking for a fresh start. She was just 18 years old, young, vibrant, and trusting. But unfortunately, she encountered Rodney Alcala. He convinced her to go with him under the pretense of taking photographs. What started as a friendly photography session turned into a scene of unimaginable horror. Her badly beaten body was found in the Hollywood Hills. She had been with such force that her face was barely recognizable. Her body was posed after death, something that later became a disturbing pattern in Alcala's. This act of staging wasn't random. It was a final assertion of control, a psychological message left behind by the killer. Georgia Wixted, 27, December 1977. 1 month later, Alcala struck again. Georgia Wixted was a nurse, someone who had dedicated her life to helping others. But she didn't stand a chance when she crossed paths with Alcala. And murder were particularly violent. The force of the beating she endured before death indicated that she had fought hard, but Alcala had overpowered her. She was struck with a nylon stocking, and her head had been repeatedly with a hammer. The forensic evidence later showed that her killer had tightened the nylon stocking multiple times, loosening it, then tightening it again, extending the suffering as long as possible. Charlotte Lamb, 32, June 1978. Charlotte Lamb's body was discovered in a laundry room in El Segundo, Los Angeles. She was strangled and left on the floor, posed unnaturally. By this time, Alcala had perfected his method. The same signs of strangulation, revival strangulation, were present. Despite similarities to other cases, police had still not connected the murders. They were scattered across different jurisdictions, and in the late 1970s, law enforcement communication wasn't as efficient as it is today. Alcala was taking advantage of this gap. Jill Parenteau, 21, June 1979. Jill Parenteau was found murdered in her apartment. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Unlike the others, there were no signs of forced entry, leading investigators to believe that Alcala had convinced her to let him inside. At this point, the number of missing women was beginning to alarm police, but Alcala's name still wasn't on their radar. Robin Samsoe, 12, June 1979. Robin Samsoe's murder was different from the others in one critical way. This time, Rodney Alcala got sloppy. Robin was just 12 years old, riding her bike to ballet class when Alcala approached her. Witnesses later recalled seeing a strange man taking pictures of her. When she failed to arrive home, her family reported her missing. Days later, her remains were found in the mountains outside Los Angeles. Unlike the other victims, her body had been heavily decomposed, making it difficult to determine the exact cause of death. This time, witnesses had seen Alcala speaking to Robin. It was the break police needed. A composite sketch of the suspect led directly to Alcala, who was arrested days later. But this was just the beginning of the legal circus that followed. The trials, a decade of delays. Rodney Alcala's legal battle dragged on for over 30 years. Despite overwhelming evidence, his case was repeatedly overturned on technicalities. He was convicted of Robin Samsoe's murder in 1980 and sentenced to death. In 1984, the verdict was overturned because the jury had been improperly informed about his criminal past. In 1986, he was retried, convicted again, and given the death penalty. In 2001, that conviction was also overturned due to improper admission of evidence. It took until 2010, more than 30 years after his arrest, for justice to finally be served. By this time, DNA evidence had linked him to 4 more murders. Alcala, believing himself to be smarter than everyone else, decided to represent himself in court. What followed was one of the most bizarre murder trials in history. Alcala's self-representation, a game of manipulation. In 2010, Alcala acted as his own attorney, putting on a bizarre courtroom performance. He cross-examined himself, asking questions in a deep voice and answering in a higher-pitched voice. He played an old interview from the dating game as part of his defense. He showed no emotion, even when evidence of his victim's suffering was presented. The jury took less than 2 hours to convict him. He was sentenced to death for a 3rd time. But he never faced execution. In 2021, Alcala died in prison of natural causes. Psychological profile. What drove him? Rodney Alcala was a textbook psychopath. He lacked empathy and viewed his victims as objects. He derived pleasure from control and suffering. He was intelligent but used his intelligence for manipulation. His crimes went beyond simple murder. He prolonged suffering, keeping victims alive longer to enjoy their pain. He posed their bodies, a final act of control even after death. His ability to blend into society, appearing on a game show in the middle of his spree, is what makes him one of the most terrifying serial killers in history. Rodney Alcala was a monster in disguise. Had the justice system worked properly, dozens of lives could have been saved. His case is a terrifying reminder that serial killers don't always fit the stereotype. They smile for the cameras. And sometimes they even win the game. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on crime cases like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay aware, stay informed, and stay safe.